We are back with another LinkedIn live session where now we turn our attention to increasing optimism. And this is certainly a skill we need now in our troubling times. We're facing a war, refugee crisis, the throes of COVID-19, and remote working. Our business lives are not changing week to week now, seemingly changing from day to day. So, what can we do? Today, my guest is Paul Cheetham, who is an EQ coach and a member of our 6 Seconds Network. Welcome, Paul.
Oh, thank you very much, David. What a lovely, positive, enthusiastic beginning to the session. So thanks for that.
And Paul, would you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your journey with emotional intelligence?
Yeah, will do. Yeah. So I guess I first come across emotional intelligence probably more than a decade ago and doing a lot of, reading around it. But in a really strange way, I had maybe a bit of knowledge, but didn't really know what to do with it. And it was only when I went on a 6 Seconds residential course back in 2017. And I don't think it's an understatement to say it really did shape my life to do what I'm doing now. And at the grand old age, probably of around about 46 then, starting to understand how I did things and why I did things, and having a framework for that was just so powerful. And I guess it's led me today to have the cautious, conservative, naturally sort of very considered person to, 40 months ago, giving up my 30-year HR career to actually run my own business in the middle of a pandemic is I guess a sign of what emotional intelligence can actually do. So yeah, that's a bit about sort of my journey and, what EQ means for me.
Great. And if I know, Paul, you're based in the UK, do you want to let everyone know where you are?
So I'm based in Newcastle upon Tyne, the famous Geordie nation that sits on the northeast coast in the UK. So I've lived here all of my life, and whilst I've been around a little bit, I always come back to the cold hardiness, but also warmth and friendliness of Newcastle upon Tyne. So for anybody watching who's never been, come up and we'll go out for a beer.
Yeah, wonderful. That'd be great. I'm certainly hoping to get to the UK in June. And actually, in 2017 was where you and I first met, Paul. So we've known each other now too for a little while, which has been lovely. And we've connected over the years, which is great. So and I love your sense of optimism already. That here you are in the middle of a pandemic. You moved on from your 30-year career, you said, into your own business. So what kind of coaching are you doing, and who are you working with?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of the EQ field, it seems to be able to apply to almost any area of your life, and some people use it in different ways. Obviously, because I've worked in HR and worked in businesses for 30 years, my I guess take on EQ and how it works best is in a business, in an organization environment. So I work with organizations who want to help their people grow in emotional intelligence, help their teams grow in emotional intelligence, but also their organization grow in emotional intelligence. And doing that not because it's just a nice thing to do, but actually because it leads to greater success for their organization. So the work that I do will be one-to-one coaching, team sort of training, facilitation, group consulting, but also do like speaking at events and that type of stuff. So that's the type of work that I would do.
Yeah, wonderful. That's great. And so we'll put up some details later about how you can connect with Paul. And please, to those of you who are on LinkedIn right now, please feel free to add your comments. Last time we had a LinkedIn, we weren't seeing the comments, but I also see now maybe we're having the same issue. So hopefully my tech team is standing by to assist there. But I can see that there are several people online. So add your comments and thoughts as we go along, and hopefully we can capture some of those as well.
Yeah,
so
that
Paul,
would be
I'd
lovely.
love to.
Yeah, just saying that would be lovely, David, because I'm going to hunt down all of the people that I'd contacted to say, come on the live stream. I want to know who was on so I can hunt down the ones who didn't attend. So please put your name and your company on there.
Absolutely. So yeah, that would be great to know who those people are. Wonderful. So Paul, let me ask you first. Our topic today is increasing optimism. I want to share some of your insights with others. So what does it mean to you? Optimism. What does it mean for you?
Okay. So when I was, I guess, thinking about this question, the first thing that sprung to mind really is around how it's perceived a little bit. So first of all, dealing with that, there's almost a sense when you talk about somebody being optimistic, you talk about optimism as like that unproductive dreamers, as if it's like a wishy-washy, not a very practical thing. So I want to sort of bust that myth, because I actually think in the 6 seconds definition of exercising optimism, it's a very practical, pragmatic thing that you can do to help you move forward in your life. And one of the quotes I like is taking a proactive perspective of hope and possibility, which I think is like a really powerful thing. So that's what it means for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Super, great. And I know you've got some others that you know here as well who are also pleased to see you, Paul. So a big hello to Ali there. Others who are joining here, maybe they're having some trouble, but please, the comments are coming through, and yeah, this is important. We remain optimistic about this, don't we, Paul? In this sense.
Yeah.
So how does it show up for you in that sense of optimism?
Yeah, so I'll be referring a little bit later on to the 6 seconds sort of model and the leadership report. So within the model, there are 8 competencies, and one of the competencies is exercise optimism. So a good starting point in terms of how it shows up for me is that in largely every one of my leadership reports that I've done, I still sort of sit towards the lower end around that. So whilst it sort of fluctuates and it probably has grown a little bit, there, depending on when I take it, I tend to show at the lower end compared to some of the competencies that I might naturally have some skills at. But for me, about the absence of optimism and being on autopilot and not really spending time seeing that I'm not feeling optimistic is probably my biggest challenge. So just living my life and then having, maybe a challenge overwhelm me and not then consciously thinking about it is the bit where I lead myself into sort of into trouble a little bit. And I think when I do feel that, it splits into those 3 areas. So there's like the thinking. So what thinking goes on, and that's like, for me, imagining how other people are going to react to particular situations. I spend time maybe a little bit of catastrophizing, a little bit of worst case scenario, the thoughts that are running through my head. Oh, how are they going to feel about that? So there's a lot of those thoughts go through my head when I'm feeling sort of less optimistic. There's also emotions going on there which revolve around self-doubt and fear and languishing too, which leads me to sort of beat myself up. So a bit of self-flagellation there. I dwell, I don't act, I close my mind to options and possibilities. So those are the things that go with that pattern of like what it feels like to be maybe pessimistic rather than optimistic. But what I try and do is use curiosity, and that's one of the powerful things that was put forward by 6 seconds and stays in my mind. Having that sense of being curious about what's going on, so that pausing to notice, this is at play here, and using that curiosity as an antidote and trying to replace those things to reframe that challenge as an opportunity. Actually, if you don't mind now, I was on a session with one of my clients this morning. So it was a group of about 20 people from a financial services organization. And maybe we were just chatting around, how to use empathy. And it changed when you went online because you couldn't be empathetic with somebody. It was more difficult because you couldn't see. And we ended up, after a bit of chat, sort of reframing that as, oh my goodness, if you were already great at empathy in real life, how great is it now that you've got an empathy at real life skill and an empathy online skill? Like you've got 2 skills where without the challenge of the COVID and working from home, you wouldn't have had that additional ability there. And that, for me, that, framing that challenge, I think is really important.
Yes.
Taking the theme of maybe some of the challenge, there's also a sense of emotions and what helps me to feel more optimistic. And while sort of calmness and clarity and having that space does, in a strange way, frustration and anger also provides optimism too. So when I'm feeling particularly hacked off with myself that I haven't done something or I'm not looking at possibility, I actually get really frustrated with myself. And that gives me the energy to go, just drive forward. And then so it does lead me to break down some of those barriers. Gives me that sense of choice, and I have got some options here. I have got ownership of this issue, and that will lead to success. So that's it. That's how that really links to me personally.
Yeah, great. And I see Catherine Roth here, who's mentioned, just as you did, choice comes with choice comes that responsibility. And it's a big part of that. And it sounds like too, just reflecting here, that you see the interplay, or you see the patterning that happening. Okay, I'm becoming more pessimistic, which is the no part of the model. And then, okay, what's my choice here? And I love this idea of the frustration and the anger actually fueling then you to create change, or to create choice, and to move forward in that way, which then perhaps creates the cycle of optimism, moving back in that direction, Paul. And curiosity being key. I like that.
It's just because I think it just gives you like a I was going to say laser-like focus is what springs to mind. It helps you just sort of, where are you putting the beam? Where are you sort of putting that attention? And I think without that, it feels gloomy, doesn't it? When you're not feeling optimistic, it just feels like the whole light ahead of you is dark. It's all foggy. You can't see the horizon. Where when you get out your big light, the lighthouse, it's like shining a beam on that situation. So that's what sort of just sprung to mind when you were thinking about that image, and the light is curiosity.
Wow. And looking out into the ocean, what's out there, and then you find something, or land, or ship, or just putting the spotlight on that. That's really good. That's a nice image for us to think about, and everyone else who's watching on now to think about here as well. So let's turn our attention now, Paul. I'd like to ask you about, you've given a lot of personal insight, which is great, but is there anyone else that you admire who really demonstrates this optimism and an optimistic outlook?
It's somebody sort of, I guess, relatively well known in the UK. So apologies if you're outside of the UK and you don't know this lady, but if not, it would be great for you to look her up. And she's called Katie Piper. And unfortunately, she was a model around 25, and she suffered an acid attack, which, awful, terrible, tragic circumstance to be caught up in. Actually, just in 2022. She was awarded an OBE for her services to, people, facial disfigurement and scarring. But now she's an author. She's a presenter. She's an activist, and just somebody who I look at from afar. That, the tragic thing that happened to her at such a young age could have easily, left her with this thing of, I don't want to go out. Looking at the face, bear in mind she was a model, so obviously a career as well relied on how she looked, and could have easily just said wallowed in this. And I think even if she was able to, to just get back out in the world and hold down a job where she wasn't known or whatever, but to actually push her life beyond where it was before in terms of her, achievements for herself first and foremost, but actually the difference she's made to thousands of people who suffer, facial disfigurement, and supporting them, and and I work in broadcasting, and the amount of lives that she impacts on from that adversity. And again, whilst I don't know, I'm sure she probably does have dark days and pessimism. She wouldn't have been able to achieve what she's achieved in the last 14 years or so, unless she was practicing optimism on a regular basis. It would be beyond belief that she was able to do this without, some perspective of going, there's a future out there for me. I can shape my life the way I want to. I can make a difference. So if anybody has, hasn't come across her before, I think she's definitely worth looking at, because to me, she's an inspirational person, and is the embodiment of optimism.
Yeah, Katie Piper, you said, for those who maybe don't know, or outside of the UK and other parts of Europe, you could Google Katie Piper, and I'm sure you'll see some of her work as well. And Paul, I particularly like what you just said there now about practicing optimism. So, of course, the competency is called increasing optimism, but you take it a step further about practicing. which makes me think that it's a skill. It's something we ought to. So often we think, oh, we label people, don't we? Oh, he's pessimistic, he's optimistic, oh, he's always optimistic, and it can work for or against us. But here we're really talking about it as a skill, as something that that you develop. So let me ask you, how does this show up in a work context for you? Is there something we can do there?
Yeah, no, definitely, and just that sense of that sort of increasing it, but exercising that optimism, like puts me in mind of like a treadmill. You're only going to get faster and being able to do it longer by exercising your optimism muscle. So that brings in mind of the right. Okay, I'm building up my optimistic fitness, if you want to call it that. So, and that definitely like relates and resonates to work. And again, I'm just going to use, I guess, somebody in business, a quote that I came across from Elon Musk, which said, I'd rather be optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right. And I'm going to leave that just
yeah. Say it one more time. We've got time to really let it sink in.
Yeah, so I'd rather be optimistic and wrong
Yeah.
than pessimistic and right.
Yeah.
So that mindset of really thinking that, okay, there's possibilities here. Oh, we tried this and we failed, but actually we've still got we're still optimistic. We're still on that optimistic path, where I certainly have that sense of, oh well, it'll not work, so I'll not try. Well, okay, you are correct, but what good does that do? You're still left wallowing in your misery. Well done for getting that right. So from a work and business context, that sense of experimenting, trying something new from that quote is really, really powerful. So, I talked about Katie Piper and Elon Musk, and all of these people seem to do sort of extraordinary things, which I think at times can feel inaccessible to people like me, where I class myself as ordinary folk. But I've just come across so many people in a working environment who, on the face of it, are ordinary people do ordinary things, but actually they're extraordinary people doing extraordinary things, but maybe just aren't well known. And now who are making small but huge changes for them in their life. And certainly even, taking one person that I'd worked with previously who had overcome like addiction challenges so that primarily they could be a better partner, parent, family member, friend, but also they wanted to show up better at work. So they, to me, just again embody this sense of, I'm going through the challenge, I've got this sort of issue, but actually there's hope at the end of this. And maybe, even though I maybe always will have this, predisposal for this particular addiction, there's a life beyond this where I can be good for myself, but also good for those people around me too. So he's one example of that. And also another person that I work with who had such a brilliant mind, but was really phased by interviews. Whenever they went into interviews, they really struggled to manage those, to get themselves across really well. And just having that perspective and hope and possibility that somebody's going to see the good work that I do, even if I do struggle at interviews, or I can get better at doing interviews, so that they can then keep on putting themselves out there, knowing that somebody's going to spot the greatness in them and they're going to get better at showing the greatness within themselves. I just think it's just an accessible thing for everybody. So hopefully people can relate to, either one of those people who I'd come across in a real life working environment, who just, to me, displayed incredible optimism to overcome their challenge, even if it wasn't building a rocket into space or overcoming severe facial disfigurement. So their problem is just as big to them potentially as other people's are. So I just want to have it put across is that this is accessible and open for everyone.
Everyday optimism for all of us.
It's for everyone. And certainly if I can move on, David, if you don't mind, in terms of maybe how I've used the tools
Please,
within that working environment. So Yeah, that sense of like using the 6 seconds leadership report to help people and understand first of all what's going on. And the exercise optimism bit, as you rightly said earlier, is in the choose yourself bit. So where I've worked with people, sometimes that sort of making the right choices is hard for them because they haven't seen what's going on. But exercise optimism is a key aspect within a working environment, because you're creating more choices. Say if you've got a particularly challenging relationship with your line manager and they will act a particular way, and maybe you respond by maybe withdrawing and always acting that way. Exercise optimism is great because it maybe just gives you that opening that says, I could try something different with that manager to see that, you know, what the outcome is, to give me a different outcome, because I think I can achieve a different outcome with that person, even if you've worked with them for years and you've always had that relationship. There's that sort of hope and going, I hope this relationship can be improved, but actually here's the plan. And the plan might even be, I can maybe challenge them a bit more rather than always sitting back. I can sort of do that. So that's the self sort of directed element of it.
Yeah.
There's also some statistical stuff, and I'm not a statistical expert, behind all of the algorithms, behind the assessment that people do, that shows that out of all of the 8 competencies, exercise optimism is the one that's strongly correlated with the success factors that are also scored in that report. So if there was a one to practice that would help you achieve greater success, then actually exercise optimism is the one, based on the research from, you know, hundreds of thousands of people who've taken that assessment. And within those success factors that I mentioned there, one of them is how effective you are. So that's about getting stuff done, working with people to get stuff done effectively. And again, exercise optimism is the one that is more strongly correlated with getting stuff done. So if I'm linking it back to that first point around, this isn't a wishy-washy, you know, dreamer mentality that this applies to. The research clearly shows that your ability to get stuff done will be largely driven by, out of all of the competencies, exercise optimism. So that's where it applies to a work, a business, and organizational context.
Yeah, very good. Very good. So for those who are interested, you could get in touch with Paul about the Say Leadership Report, certainly. And at 6 seconds, we can certainly help you to understand more. And you mentioned it's one of your favorite tools. And that's really good too, to really go deep. And from what I heard before earlier, you had a personal experience with the tool. Then you saw that it was one of those things that you could work on, and hence it's become your competency that you really focus on and build. Practice
and just
every day.
100%. So what I use, and obviously the 6 seconds tool is great because you can do that. You know, you can do the assessment and you went with a coach and all this stuff, which is obviously great. But one of the tools that's available to anyone is the optimism bridge, and I use this personally in my work to improve my optimism. And it's a lovely visual image, and it's based on Martin Seligman's work around sort of like, you know, attribution theory. You know, why is your life going badly? What do I do with it? And 6 seconds have presented it in a lovely way, where you've got on one side of the river, you've got 3 P's, and then you've got the river, and then you've got 3 bridges crossing across, and you've got a T, an I, and an E. And I'm just, have I got time to go through those now?
Yeah, we've got time for that. Yeah, the Bridges of Optimism. Tell us about it, Paul.
Yeah. So the first P is about permanence. So when you're in a negative state of mind, you'll think, oh, goodness, this will last forever. It's always going to be this way. I'm never going to get by it. To cross the bridge into the optimistic approach is about, it's temporary. Even if something, you know, all of a sudden I've lost my job, I'm not going to get that job back. But not having a job may well not be temporary. You know, it will be temporary, because you might look for a job. You might start your own business. You can do all sorts of other things. So, you know, looking at permanence versus how temporary it is can help you move into, this will pass. No matter how difficult it is, this will pass. The second P is around pervasiveness, and this is the one I struggle with.
Mhm.
So when you're in that negative side of the bridge, it'll say, oh, this terrible situation is bleeding into every single part of my life. And I
Mhm.
know when I face a challenge, it leaks. So, so if something happened in a work context, or, struggling with work, it leaks into how I feel in myself when I'm alone, how I feel when I'm with family. I go a
Mhm.
bit maybe more withdrawn and a bit more morose.
Mhm.
But crossing over to this side, which is almost going, I'm boxing that off. This is isolated. Look, I'm
Mhm.
still okay. It affects this part of my life, but not that part. Here's
Mm.
the parts that are going brilliantly well. Have an amazing family. Terrible things that are happening in Ukraine. I haven't got that. I've got, a roof over my head. I feel safe.
Mhm.
So having that sense of being able to cross the bridge and going, yes, still acknowledge the challenge that's there,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
you can box that off so it doesn't bleed into other areas.
Mhm.
Um, and the final bridge is around that powerlessness. So
Mm.
feeling like it's the world, attacking me and there's nothing I can do about it. It's all their fault. And moving across the bridge says, I have power to do something about this.
Mhm.
Maybe I didn't cause the issue, but I can do something to affect that. And the E
Yeah.
is effort.
Yeah.
So with you going, this is temporary. This is only
Mhm.
in one part of my life, which makes it
Mhm.
manageable.
Mhm.
Right, I can now do something about this, and you can apply this to every single challenge. So
Mhm.
I'd encourage everybody to really, when they come across their next challenge and are feeling maybe pessimistic about it, think, will this last forever? What parts of my life are affected, or maybe even
Mhm.
not affected? And what action could I take here? So
Mhm.
three key questions that will help you move from pessimism to optimism.
Mhm. Cross that bridge. Yeah.
Yeah.
You can even using your analogies today, put a light on the bridge, and then you can shine it in the direction you want to go. Why
Yeah,
not?
yeah,
Yeah.
and even linking it back to talking about the beautiful place where I live, Newcastle upon Tyne, is a
Mhm.
city. Although we've had economic challenges and necessarily not the most affluent part of the UK, we have 7 bridges at the core part of Newcastle, which
Mm.
says that there are options within Newcastle. We feel, and I think that fits the Geordie Newcastle spirit of
Mm.
having 7 options to, cross.
Yeah.
Feels like a really powerful thing to me.
Yeah, that's great. Wow, Paul, this has been a very rich discussion, and we've had some good comments coming through. Others who have failed to log on. I think there's been an issue behind the scenes on LinkedIn. So
Mm.
those who are watching this afterwards, let's give them something special here. There may be those who watch the broadcast again to get to the end here. Is there anything as a last thought that you'd like to leave us with, or to share a quote or a message from you?
Yeah. And again, put some thought into what I wanted to leave people with. And actually, it's a quote by Joshua Friedman, who's the chief executive of 6 Seconds. And he has a quote. I'm just going to quickly read it, which is, knowing there are possibilities even when you can't see them.
Mm.
And I just think that's a really powerful thing, because sometimes we can't see a way forward. But optimism often is thinking there will be a way forward. The curtain just hasn't been pulled back yet. It looks dark. Well, it will do because your curtains are shut. Yeah, okay. Open those curtains,
The
and it
fog.
will reveal. It will reveal itself, even if you don't know what you're going to see.
Yeah.
It will. It will come.
Wow. Yeah. Say the quote one more time for us, Paul.
Yeah, knowing there are possibilities, even when you can't see them.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that one. That's a nice way to leave us here today. Certainly, we are in times there we don't always know the way right now in
Mm,
the current climate of the world, and so this is a necessary skill. This is really something that we want you, those in our network, those in the broader business community, to really take on and think about there as well. So
mm.
we put some details about how you can connect with Paul, but Paul, you're also on LinkedIn. As
I
I
am.
understand, of course, we're here on LinkedIn Live. So if you're watching and you want to connect with Paul, please do and reach out to him, direct message, share your thoughts, and share your thoughts with us in the comments below as well. Whether you've watched it just now, maybe the broadcast has been okay for you. Maybe you've just watched it and it's later after today's event. And we thank you either way for watching and being here with us today. We are 6 Seconds Europe, And we really look forward to welcoming you to part of our community. And connect with us here on LinkedIn. Find out about our events. We also have a global live stream tonight at 6 p.m. Central European time on the Ukrainian crisis, where we're interviewing a panel of 5 people who are really right in different parts of that conflict and have different understandings to bring us awareness of what emotions and what we can do in this emotional moment, in this emotional crisis, as much as it is a humanitarian crisis as well. So Paul Cheatham, thank you so much for joining us. We look forward to connecting with you again and taking things further. And I've certainly learned some tips today about practicing my optimism every day. So thank you so much, Paul. And let's end the broadcast there. Take care.
Take care. Bye now. Bye, everyone.